they can bring back result for the next 5 years, Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, I think you're going to get the same result when you get to Kansas City in the playoffs every year with this defensive line as it is. I thought Ed Oliver played great against the Chiefs in the championship game this year. Greg Rizzo is the one who kind of fakes planted a little bit. The year before that, it was Ed Oliver who was non-existent in their divisional round loss. They got to do something. What do you foresee them doing? The question for both of you.
I mean, they've been trying for a long time. They're spending as much money as just about every team. Spending draft capital on premium players on the D-line just about as much as any other team. Like they have been putting the resources toward. That's where it's so disheartening if you're the Buffalo Bills to pour the resources into this and get to the same place year after year against Patrick Mahomes, and he just has his absolute best games against you. Like the Philadelphia Eagles are proof that he does bleed. You can beat this team. You can beat this quarterback. I was down there in New Orleans all week talking to those Eagles. I mean, it's a nasty group. Jalen Carter, I don't know how he fell to the 9th overall pick. What a steal. Across the board, the D-line, even the back of the secondary, like C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Here's somebody they bring in twice, voted the most annoying player in the NFL at your site, The Athletic, right? There's teams like the Bills probably. They don't touch these players. They don't consider these players. So I'm getting to an answer there where it's like, okay, yes, you are picking 29th, 30th, 31st. Brandon Bean brings that up a lot. And to a point, he is right. Like, it's hard to get Chris Jones level, A-plus level talents when you're picking at the end of the round. But guess what? Chris Jones was a second-round pick. Like, I think they do have to take a chance. They're going to have to take a gamble. The camaraderie and the everyone eats and everybody playing Settlers of Catan and everybody loving up that stuff does matter. I'm not going to minimize it.
Sure.
Like, football is a human game. You got to love the guy next to you when it's late in the fourth quarter. You got to make a play, and you're on E. Like, there is something to that. But I think that if you take a calculated risk here and there, maybe you hit, maybe you have a badass with bad intentions. Look, you're hiring somebody to legally whoop somebody's ass. It's professional football. Sure. This isn't a 9-to-5 job. This isn't a library. This isn't the post office. Like these Eagles, Jalen Carter just smacked Mahomes across the head, and he does that kind of stuff strategically. And I've talked to people around the Eagles, like he knows when to take those cheap shots, and the ref isn't going to see it. Give me that kind of player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to be open, I think, philosophically here and there to take a chance when, you don't have the money to just pay up. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with Myles Garrett, Max Crosby. These guys, they're not. You tell me if I'm wrong. They're not going to do something like that. I'd be shocked if they do. So if you're not going to do that and take that kind of chance, which I'm not even against, maybe take a gamble here and there because something's got to change when you get to the same point year after year after year. Last point I'll make, though, if I'm going to assign blame for this all, I still think you come back to the defensive-minded head coach because this team overall, talent-wise, they were good enough to beat the Chiefs 4 times in the regular season.
Right.
Like, collectively, Bean has hit on some of these mid-round picks. I'm not going to go as hard as my man Jim Monis. Like, the first-round picks leave a little bit to be desired, but I think he has hit enough to where, okay, you got to see something other than a total calamity against the Chiefs.
I'm not sure I'm not sure if your top 4 defensive ends next year is Greg Rizzo, Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, and Dwan Smoot. I don't know that history's not going to repeat itself time and time
Agreed.
Again. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I will say that I do believe that they took a step forward this past year, even though the results was them not going to the Super Bowl, because they got to the AFC Championship game. They beat a really good team in the Ravens in the divisional round. They completely changed the scope of what they did on defense the entire year in that Ravens game. It was a great adjustment at halftime for them to basically go from zone to man to limit what Lamar could do from a ground perspective. And that's kind of what helped them get to where they were. The Chiefs game was not their finest hour, but there were some key nuances to that game. I think Christian Benford going down as early as he did completely changed the entire complexion of the game, because you're without Benford, who is by and large your best cornerback. He helps hide so much. And he also gives you the flexibility to easily go between zone and man because he can do both. With him out of the lineup, that's Douglas, who is not that good in man coverage anymore. and Kaiir Elam, who's just not that good.
Mhm.
And having those two elements, Mahomes was able to get the ball out super quick. So it's like this full scale problem
That's
to
true.
where he's getting the ball out quickly. And if no one is really covered, and they had to go to man because they had to try and blitz to get after him. And the old adage with Patrick Mahomes, you don't blitz Patrick Mahomes. It just never works.
The Eagles didn't do it once.
It never works out well for you. So because they didn't have the back end support, and they had to put more resources towards getting after Mahomes because he was getting the ball out so quickly, it was just kind of like this one problem battling the other, one problem battling the other. Now, where I will agree is that the defensive line needs to be way better than it was this past year. Greg Rousseau has been a good player. He's a good all-around defensive end, and he's got a great pressure rate when you look at it stacked up against the league. Bringing down the quarterback is also a skill that I think he needs to really. He's topped out at 8 sacks, and we're now 4 years into his career. So, what is his ceiling is the big question. And then Epinesa was, I think, a major failure as a starter all year. They couldn't play him on third downs. Von Miller is just a rotational guy, so you can't really expect too much out of him. So I'm with you. I think there's going to be a change, but I will disagree with Tyler. I think if Myles Garrett is on the market, I think the Bills are trying everything they can to get him, because listening to them talk about game records and how they just never become available, all of these other things. Like, these first round picks are all great in theory when you have when you land on a Greg Rousseau and he's a good 5-year player for you. But is he really a ceiling player for you? And a lot of these other guys, whether it be a Kincaid, who I think will have a much better year next year, mind you, Elam, who is a later first-round pick, and all of these other things. I think when you get to the spot where you say, okay, Josh Allen is now entering his age 29 season. The time to mess around and think about the future and also the now, it's quickly dissipating.
Yeah.
So for that reason, this whole idea of sustained success, you just got to have success right now. And pairing him with a guy in Myles Garrett, who is the same age as him, both age 29, same timeline, same everything, you have the resources to potentially do it. I mean, Brandon Beane, I found it really interesting at the Combine when he was asked by Jay Sikursky of the Buffalo News whether or not he would hesitate trading away his first for a proven asset. And in past years, Beane has always kind of like, he's like, it would have to be really the right thing. I love my first round picks. And this year he's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't flinch. Yeah. He's like, I'm a lot of things on the golf course, but scared ain't one of them, was his quote. And I'm like, oh, that's a bit more interesting. So if it's sending away 1 first round pick, 2 first round picks, if it helps them, give them that game wrecking pass rusher that they haven't had outside of the first 12 games of 2022 before Von Miller tore his ACL, then I think they should go fully in on it, and it would help the entire defensive environment from that point forward.
I agree with that too. They should do that.
I think they will.
They absolutely should.
If Garrett,
you think they will?
I guess
I'm.
If the Browns say we're open for business, I think the Bills are going to be one of the first calls.